Hello, Year 9. It is lovely to be with you again today. Just ignore the date on the top of this page because it is not that day, obviously. That's the day I'm recording this lesson. For this lesson, you might want to have a pen and some paper handy. That would be good. You also do need your student pack that you were posted. Some of the print is quite small on this PowerPoint, and I couldn't figure out how to make it bigger. So I'm hoping that you can read along on your pack, because it will be easier for you to see, and also because you are going to have to write on one of the pieces in your pack, okay? So your do now task for today is to think about the passage we read in the last lesson where they declared their love for each other but not to each other yet. So number 1 asks, how are Romeo and Juliet similar at this point in the play, and how are they different? So do their similarities and differences make them well suited to each other? Do we think that opposites attract? Or better yet, are they good for each other, opposites? So pause the video here. You could make a little chart with similarities and differences, or just write a couple of bullet points to summarize what you feel are the differences between these two very different young people. So pause the video here and write your response, and then press play again when you're done. So some of the things that you might have said are that Romeo, he's very impulsive, isn't he? And he doesn't think through things before he does them. He just acts quickly. And he is very passionate and exaggerates his Juliet's beauty. So he tends to be a daydreamer, does our Romeo. Juliet, on the other hand, is more practical. Not completely practical, but more practical than Romeo. Certainly thinks through things a little bit more than her beloved. And do they make them well suited to each other? Well, that's for you to decide, really. Obviously, we know how this play ends, but it's not necessarily because of their personalities per se, although arguably their choices are made because of how they are as people. But, do opposites attract? Are they well suited to each other? That's for you to decide. So last lesson, we read soliloquies by both Romeo and Juliet. In these two soliloquies, they told the audience how they felt about each other. Even though Romeo overheard what Juliet said, the lovers have not told each other how they feel about each other in person. And there you can see Romeo staring up at his love, Juliet, on the balcony. Today we're going to read the two lovers declaring their love to each other. It's quite a long passage, so if you have to start and stop, that's okay. Make sure it's more important that you understand than that you get through it quickly, okay? We're going to read this passage in an edited version. This version is slightly shorter and contains the most relevant and important parts. So we're going to read the rest of the scene. Now, this is in your workbook on page 10. So I want you to go and grab page 10 in your student pack and follow along. It starts with Romeo and Juliet exchange vows. And we're looking at Act 2, Scene 2, lines 49 to 189. Okay? And the way this is going to work is what we're going to do, we're not going to read all of it in depth. I'm going to read it and explain certain parts as we go through. But the basic point of this exercise is just so that you have an idea of the key things that the two lovers tell each other, and also what those things explain about their personalities and what they're like as people. Okay, so we're going to divide it in, I think it's about 10 sections, and at the top of each page is a statement, or in some cases a few statements, which correspond with a section of the extract. So pen ready, a ruler would be helpful, or a straight edge as well. So at the top of each page, there are statements that explain what's happening. You will need to divide the script into passages that match these numbered descriptions. So we're going to do this together. So the first thing that happens is when Romeo reveals himself, Juliet fears for his safety. So that's the number one first chunk of the text. And then the second chunk is Juliet warning Romeo that her family will kill him if they find him. So now I'm going to read this to you. And as I said before, the font is a bit small. So hopefully you have your extract with you and you have me reading this on the screen. So between those two things, hopefully you can see at least one of them clearly, okay? And now you'll have to excuse my, I'm going to do an impression of Romeo's voice here, right? Because clearly in class I would have two volunteers reading this. But where I'm here on my own, I have to do both voices on my own. So I'm going to do my best Juliet voice and my best Romeo voice for you, okay? And I am taking nominations to the Academy and is it BAFTA? British Film Awards. Yep, that's me, okay? So remember to get your nomination in on time. Okay, Romeo. I take thee at the... oh, I forgot to say, this is right after she says, deny thy father. Okay, and she's saying, if you don't get rid of your name, I'll get rid of mine. And Romeo gets all excited about this and says, I take thee at thy word. Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I never will be Romeo. So he's saying, fine, I take you at your word. I'll do exactly what you say. Call me your love, and I will never be called Romeo again. Now, Juliet, bear in mind, doesn't know that he's there. Okay, he's just sort of hanging out in her garden listening to what she's saying and doesn't actually reveal himself until now. So, of course, she's a bit surprised by his visit and she didn't know he was there. So she says, what man art thou that thus bescreened in night so stumblest upon my counsel? So she's saying, who are you? And why are you listening to what I'm saying? And then slowly it becomes revealed of who he is. And he says, by a name I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself, because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word. It's all very dramatic. So basically he's saying, I can't tell you who I am, saint, because I hate my name, because it is your enemy. My ears have not yet drunk 100 words of thy tongue's uttering, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo and Montague? So presumably she can't see very clearly. Or she's asking him to confirm what I believe it was the nurse told her, that he's Romeo and a Montague, and therefore her enemy. Romeo, neither, fair maid, if either thee dislike. And then Juliet says, ever the practical one, how camest thou hither? So in other words, how are you here? Tell me, and wherefore? The orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art. If any of my kinsmen find thee here. And Romeo, being ever the dreamer, says, with love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out, and what love can do that dares love attempt. Therefore thy kinsmen are no stop to me. So basically love made him so light he could fly over the walls. Okay. If they do see thee, they will murder thee. Alack, there lies more peril in thine eye than 20 of their swords. Look thou but sweet, and I am proof against their enmity. In other words, if you look at me, darling, I am safe against their swords. I'm not sure how effective swords are against, words are against swords, but you can judge that for yourself. Juliet, I would not for the world they saw thee here. Romeo, I have night's cloak to hide me from their eyes, but thou love me, let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than death prolonged, wanting of thy love. So basically he's saying here that he's first of all, he's in the dark. So he says, they can't see me because I'm in the dark. But if you love me, Juliet, let them find me. So he's basically taunting them, taunting fate, saying, let them find me, because he were better off dead than wanting of her love. Okay, so there are two things basically that you need to remember from this passage, and one is that Romeo reveals himself, lets her know he's there, and then she fears for his safety. So she's saying, listen, if they find you here, they will kill you. And and then she warns him that they will kill him. So at first she's afraid, saying, look, you're not safe here. And then she warns that her family will kill him. So what I'm going to do now is draw a line. So from I take thee at thy word to the middle green box there, stop to me, that's where that first section is. So can you please draw a line, okay, where you see that green dotted line now. So Romeo says, with love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out. Stone walls are apparently no barrier to love. Okay. And then Juliet says, if they do see thee, they will murder thee. Okay. I shouldn't laugh because, you know, his life is in danger, but yet I'm so amused by this idea. I love this scene, this idea where this boy is so head over heels for this girl that he's just floating on air, and he's spouting all these poetic, beautiful things to her, and they only just met earlier that evening. Okay, so you should have one written in the side there, and I think where that statement is, number one, so look at the top, when Romeo reveals himself, she fears for his safety. It would be good if you could write that next to this section of this extract. Okay, I didn't have a chance to show you precisely on the page, but if you can say where that one is, the handwritten one, next to the extract, write, when Romeo reveals himself, she fears for his safety. And then obviously in the bottom bit, where that handwritten two is now, you want to write, Juliet warns Romeo that her family will kill him if they find him. That's a pretty easy line to remember. If they do see thee, they will murder thee. Okay, lots of E sounds. Okay, so press pause, make sure you've got that written in next to your extract. Okay, we've just done that. So in here we've got 4 more things happening. This extract is considerably smaller print, so again you may want to look at your own extract. So the first thing we're going to see here is admitting embarrassment at being overheard telling of her love. Juliet asks if Romeo loves her, because of course she's just been talking, ah, me, dear perfection, right? And she's said out loud, and she's been heard by Romeo, but Romeo has not been heard by Juliet, so it's a bit uneven. So now she's a bit embarrassed. And then Romeo and Juliet exchange vows of love, but both are fearful. Juliet fears the suddenness of their love. And then Juliet, promising marriage, says she will send a messenger tomorrow to ask for the time and place of the wedding. At the nurse's call, Juliet goes inside the house. So this is what happens, okay? So I'm going to read this to you in my best Juliet and Romeo voices. Thou knowest the mask of night is on my face, else would a maiden blush bepaint my cheek. Why was she blushing? Because she's embarrassed. Dost thou love me? That's a pretty brave thing to ask someone that you just met a few hours earlier. Do you love me? She's quite, I think, quite determined, quite assertive there, right? I know thou wilt say, aye, and I will take thy word. O gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully. So in other words, if you do love me, tell me, pronounce it, tell me. Or if thou thinkest I am too quickly won, I'll frown and be perverse, and say thee nay. So thou wilt woo, but else not for the world. So she's saying, if I'm being too bold here, and if I'm letting you win me too quickly, then tell me and I'll be perverse. And what she means by that is I'll play coy. I'll pretend. But she's not the pretending type, Juliet, I don't think. In truth, listen to this. She's very brutally honest here. In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond, and therefore thou mayest think my behaviour light. So she's saying, I am too fond. I'm too fond of you. But trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true than those that have more coying to be strange. So basically what she's saying is that she's more honest and more true than any girls who pretend to play hard to get or flirt. Okay, I'm sure that's a phrase or an idea that you're probably familiar with, the idea of playing hard to get, where you pretend that you don't like someone when you really do like someone. The fun and games of being young, right? So she's saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm far more true, I'm far more honest than that. Juliet's very consistent in how level-headed she is. I should have been more strange, I must confess, but that thou overheardst ere I was ware, my true love passion, therefore pardon me, and not impute this yielding to light love, which the dark night hath so discovered. She's saying, I wouldn't have been maybe perhaps that direct, but since you heard me anyway. 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If thy bent be of love be honourable, thy purposed marriage, send me word tomorrow by one that I'll procure to come to thee. where and what time thou wilt perform the rite, and all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world. Now, I should probably just mention that we have narrowed this down to you, to just the nuggets that you need to remember or know. So don't be overwhelmed by all of this information and all of these words. Basically, she's saying, yeah, I wouldn't have been so direct, but since you heard me confess my love, I might as well be honest. And I am a very honest person. I'm not going to play hard to get. But if you're honorable, and if your purpose marriage, so in other words, not just a dalliance in the evening, but an honest, true relationship, marriage, then she says she's going to send her nurse to him at 1 o'clock to find out the time and date of the wedding. That's right. So they're planning to get married tomorrow. Okay. So the nurse calls Juliet at this point and interrupts and says, Madame! Speaking of which, I'm also getting interrupted. And Juliet answers, I come anon. But if thou meanest not well, she's talking back to Romeo, I do beseech thee. Nurse, Madame! By and by I come, to cease thy strife and leave me to my grief. Tomorrow I will send. So she's trying to have this conversation with Romeo at the same time that she's trying to get her nurse to leave her alone and let her get on with things. Where am I? So her nurse keeps calling her. She doesn't want to go in just yet. She's still trying to get this message to Romeo. Okay, so where you need to start dividing your page is the third bit where she admits embarrassment is right there. Okay, so right under the line, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully. You can divide your page there and you can write the statement or write it next to your extract that she's showing that she's embarrassed in that section. Okay. And then in the next bit, you can draw your line between the words, which the dark night hath so discovered, and 3 words, dear Romeo, good night indeed. Okay. So in that section, Romeo and Juliet, Juliet is declaring her love for Romeo. Okay, and there's section 5. She's promising marriage and will send a messenger to ask for the time and place of the wedding. And then the nurse tries to call. And she says, when she says, I come anon, that means, anon is a word that means soon, or I'm on my way kind of thing, quickly, okay? So if you imagine that you're outside or somewhere else in the house and your mom's calling you and you're in the middle of a conversation with someone, that's what's happening with Juliet here, okay? So she has quite a long speech here to Romeo. And she's revealing quite a lot about what she's feeling and what her intentions are. So next, returning from inside, Juliet calls Romeo back, and they're very reluctant to part. This is also a famous section. She compares him to a captive bird that can never escape from its owner, and Romeo promises to seek Friar Lawrence's help, which we're going to look at in the next lesson. So again, do my best Romeo and Juliet voices. 1,000 times the worse to want thy light. Love goes toward love as schoolboys from their books, but love from love towards school with heavy looks. Romeo! So she comes back and he says, my niece, which is a young unfledged hawk. So the hawk is still in the nest. So the implication here is that she's a hawk, which is a bird of prey, but still in the nest. So I'm sure Romeo here is implying that he's quite happy and willing to show her how to leave the nest, perhaps. Juliet says, what o'clock tomorrow shall I send to thee? And he says, by the hour of 9. So right in the morning, which shows his eagerness. And she responds with, I will not fail. 'Tis 20 years till then. 'Tis almost morning. I would have thee gone, and yet no farther than a wanton's bird. who lets it hop a little from her hand, like a poor prisoner in its twisted gyves, and with a silken thread plucks it back again, so loving, jealous of his liberty. Basically just saying that she would like to just let him go a little bit. She wants to keep him like a little pet, tied to her, so to speak. And he says, I were that bird. So he wants to be her little pet. And Juliet responds with, sweet, so would I, yet I should kill thee with much cherishing. A little bit of foreshadowing there. Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow. So, and then she leaves. And Romeo says, sweet sleep dwell upon thine eyes, peace in thy breast. Would I were sleep and peace, so sweet to rest. Hence I will to my ghostly sire's close cell, his help to crave, and my dear hap to tell. So, you can see the notes there for a bit more detail, but basically the lines probably that are the most famous are good night, parting is such sweet sorrow that it shall say good night until it be morrow. And there's lots of like comedic sketches, isn't there, and things on TV where two people who are in love never want to say goodbye, so they're always saying, oh, not only that I love you more, back and forth, but also there's the idea that they just don't want to say goodbye. So if you haven't been in love yet, maybe you have not experienced that, but I'm sure some point in your life, I certainly hope anyway, that you meet someone that you just don't want to say goodbye to. So you stay on the phone as long as you can, or on the internet as long as you can. Don't know how you communicate with each other nowadays, but it would certainly be something that is a good thing. Makes people happy. Okay, so anyway, trying to navigate around a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old is not fun when you're trying to record a lesson. Okay, so let's divide this page up then. Okay, so number 7, Juliet calls him back. They reluctantly part. 'Tis 20 years till then, she says. So she really doesn't want him gone. She compares him to a captive bird that can never escape from its owner. I think it's really interesting that she says, I should kill thee with much cherishing. Obviously what she means there is that if he's a tiny bird and she's holding him too tightly, then she's risking crushing him, which of course has quite significant implications for later in the play. And then finally, he promises to seek Friar Lawrence's help. And a friar, I think you've already been taught this, but a friar is a name for a priest. Okay, so a priest in the Catholic faith. So of course he's going to the priest to get an idea of whether or not the priest, will marry them. Okay, so hopefully you got something from that in terms of the process of their conversation and the main points of what happens. Okay, we're going to look at a bit of what Juliet said in a minute in more detail, and I've pulled just the key bits that you need to know out. Because of course there's a lot more in there than you really need to understand fully. It's more just getting an idea that they meet, they don't know, or she doesn't know he's there, and a lot is revealed between them. Okay, so when we first met Juliet, she was with her mother and her nurse, and at that point Shakespeare presented her in this way. In Act 1, Scene 3, Shakespeare presents Juliet as a humble and obedient daughter. She tells her that a marriage is an honor that she has not dreamed of. She is meek and listens patiently to what her mother says. At no point does Juliet say whether she wants to get married. She just accepts what her mother tells her. Ignore the flashing bit at the bottom for now. After hearing a description of Paris's looks and personality, Juliet says that she will look to like Paris in an attempt to please her mother. She wants to like Paris to marry him, to obey her mother's wishes. At the end of Romeo and Juliet, Juliet allows other people to tell her what to do and how to feel. And here's that bit that's been flashing the whole time. Was Juliet presented like this in the scene we have just read, or has she changed? So at first, she is an obedient girl. She wants to please her mother and her family, and she knows that Paris is good looking. She doesn't know him at all. Arguably knows him at this point even less than Romeo. So we're going to look just at these little sections here, but not the whole thing. So this is where it came from. Okay. You can pause here and read this on your own for extension, or you can wait till the next slide because I've narrowed it down for you. Okay, so here are the main points that she makes. She asks Romeo, "Dost thou love me?" And then she says, "If thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully." So in other words, tell me now, be honest. And then she says, "In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond." So she recognizes already that her love for him and attraction to him is almost too much. She's too fond of him. "But trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true than those that have more coying to be strange. If that thy bent of love be honourable, thy purpose marriage, send me word to-morrow, and all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world." So at the bottom, you'll see a list of adjectives there that can be applied to these statements that Juliet has made. So what I want you to do now in a moment, once I finish explaining, is pause the video, okay? So when you pause it, what I want you to do is read these statements, and you can write them down to help you, and then apply the adjectives where you think they belong. So the adjectives themselves are assertive, which means that she acts and does what she wants to do. Devoted, which means loyal, true, passionate, honest, self-aware. So she's aware, she knows what she wants. Determined, direct, confident, and controlled. So pause the video here and see what quotations reveal these character traits about Juliet, okay? So if I think when I do it, it does all of them, it applies all of them. So pause it now and write them down. Never mind, I've done it for you here. These were my answers. I'm not going to re-record it though because I'm short of time, so but this may have been what you would have written anyway. So, "Dost thou love me?" Asking someone directly, "Do you love me?" That's quite a direct thing to say. That's not a game player, okay? And then she says, "Okay, but if you do, you have to pronounce it." So she's telling him, "You have to tell me that you love me." Okay? When she says, "I am too fond of you," she knows what she wants. She's self-aware. She knows that her feelings are really strong. And some people don't, do they? Some people don't know how they're feeling. But she does. And she says, "Trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true." Clearly that means that she's true and she's honest. She's controlled. She's saying, if you have honorable intentions and you want to marry me, send me word tomorrow. So she's controlled, she's determined. And then finally, she says to him, "All my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world." So despite the fact that she's assertive, confident, controlled, she is devoted to him and very passionate. So she's very much over the moon for him. Okay, finally, on your own, we're going to write a paragraph on this question. How does Shakespeare present Juliet in Act 2, Scene 2? And there is an example on the next page. But if you start listing, you could use the adjectives that I just went through with you to add to your answer, okay? But we'd like you to include the term tragic flaw in your answer. So if you remember, a character's tragic flaw is something which the writer includes to be an exceptional part of their personality, something that is all-consuming to them. So what is Juliet's fatal flaw? Have you figured that out? Okay, so you're going to write your own paragraph. On the next page is an example paragraph. Okay, but before you look, pause the video here and write your own paragraph. Then when we switch to the next page, when you're finished, you can switch to the next page and I will read you an example paragraph and you should compare it to the one you've written and see if there's something you can add to your own, okay? So answer the question, how does Shakespeare present Juliet in Act 2, Scene 2 now? Pause the video here. Okay, so hopefully you did pause it and you did write your own paragraph. Okay, I know the temptation must be to think, oh, I'm going to look at Mrs. Example first. Well, fair enough, but see what I've written here and see if there's something that you can add to your own paragraph. After Juliet has fallen in love with Romeo, Shakespeare portrays her as a completely different character. She is no longer the meek and submissive girl that accepted her mother's wishes. Rather, her passion for Romeo has awakened a confident and assertive woman who is determined to take control of her own life. She is not shy and humble on seeing Romeo. She asks him plainly, "Dost thou love me?" She's not interested in playing games or courting Romeo. Her new confidence and passion allows her to state her mind plainly and to expect a straight response. Paris is now completely out of her mind, and the consent of her mother and father is irrelevant, in contrast to the intense feelings she has now for Romeo. As overwhelmed as Juliet is by her feelings, she still has the self-control to recognize how she appears to Romeo. She does not want to seem like a little girl with a silly crush on a boy whose favor is lightly won and lost. Juliet wants Romeo to know that she is true and completely devoted and committed to him. When she says that she is prepared to make thee my lord, it is her decision, not her father's or mother's. Juliet takes ownership of her love for Romeo, and with it, she is a strong and empowered woman, not a meek and obedient girl. However, at this point in the play, Juliet's tragic flaw starts to become clear because the audience knows that her passionate love for Romeo will lead to her downfall. If you hear like a little, can you hear that? My cat's purring. Sorry. She's quite happy with this. Okay, so there's my example paragraph. Okay, it's a loosely structured C's paragraph, but don't worry about that too much. It's more about showing that you are aware of how Juliet has changed in the audience's eye. Okay, when we first meet her and her mother is there, she's meek, she's obedient, she's eager to please. And the Juliet that we see now is take charge, action, going after what she wants. Okay? So that's it for today. Finally, how is Juliet presented in Act 2, Scene 2 of Romeo and Juliet? So your choices are A, B, C, D, or E. A, Juliet is presented as a scared girl who is afraid of going against her mother's wishes. B, she is presented as a confident young woman who is determined to be with the person she loves. C, she is presented as a shy girl who is embarrassed to show her true feelings to Romeo. D, she is presented as a passionate woman who is able to tell Romeo of her love for him. E, she is presented as an obedient daughter who wants to introduce Romeo to her father to seek his approval. Okay, so how is she presented? If you guessed B and D, you're right. Yay! Ding, 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 ding.